This is a public hearing. So for each case, there will be a public hearing. We ask that the applicant keep their presentation to under 10 minutes. They may reserve 2 minutes as a rebuttal. We ask that the public keep their comments to 2 minutes unless they are representing an organization or group that may have, and then they may have 5 minutes. Appeal of decision from the Historic Zoning Commission. Pursuant to the provision of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County. This is statutory writ of certiorari. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. Consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. So our first on our agenda is the adoption, and I think we have Robin?
Yes, for it.
I got it. I
don't know that you know them all.
Okay.
422 Broadway is deferred at the request of the applicant. We're also going to bring back the rules of order and procedure and training to you at another date.
So Robin says that the 422 Broadway is deferred, and the procedural revision to rules of order and procedure will be deferred until next meeting. Correct, Robin? Okay. And training. Okay.
Before I present the consent agenda, would you like to also review and approve the minutes for last month?
There is something we need to, the adoption of the agenda on the deferred item 422 Broadway. We'd like to get some legal comments on that. Can I preface the legal counsel? Commissioners, 422 Broadway has been deferred 3 times on our public an agenda, and therefore the public has seen this deferral over 11/15/17, 1/17/18, 2/21/18, and we are now seeing this for the 4th time, thus being deferred again. So we'd like to get legal counsel on this number of deferrals.
Okay. Typically, when you have an application that comes before you, you have someone that is seeking to construct something or seeking to make a revision in their building or their structure. And so a determination as to whether to defer the item is really within their purview, because they have some discretion as to when they may want to start their project. This particular application is a little bit different. This is not your typical application that you would see. This is one that has been essentially remanded back to this court, back to this board for review. The court has, and I don't want to use the term remand because that's a technical term, but it has been ordered by the court that the applicant make application to this board to have the item weighed upon by you all. So it's a little bit different. There was a court case that was held back in, I think it was, the court made their ruling back in November. And like I said, part of that ruling was that they come back here and seek your approval for the changes that they had made to their structure. So this one's a little bit different. It really does need to come back before this board so that you can rule on it and so that we can move forward with whatever is going to happen as a result of that. I understand that that counsel for the applicant has requested a deferral today, and it looks as though that will be granted today. But I think that I also understand that counsel for the applicant has indicated that they will be here at the next meeting. So we can talk about that more in terms of the posture of it at that point. But I wanted to make sure the board was aware that this is not your typical application.
Another clarification there, counsel. So therefore, because there's a court order, thank you. So this is particularly delayed compliance?
Right, essentially. Every time that it is deferred, well, let me go back. The case started because there was an effort to do something with the property that had not been approved by this board. We tried to enforce against that so that, you know, the changes that had been made to the structure could be removed. The court found that they were in violation and that they that this board needed to make a decision because you had never been given the opportunity to make a decision on that particular modification of that building. In the meantime, that modification remains on the property. So the violation that you were trying to seek remedy for remains on the property to this day, and it will continue to remain until this matter is resolved, because part of the court's order was that it not be removed, but that you have an opportunity to weigh in on it.
How many times can the applicant defer?
That's kind of an interesting question, because typically an applicant can defer as many times really as they want it to, because it is their project typically. But here, I don't know that they can delay ad nauseum, okay, because the court has ordered them to come here. So delaying your review is delaying implementation of the court's order, not just of their project or what you know, like you would normally have in a typical application scenario.
If they come up and ask for a deferral next month again, would we grant that deferral?
I don't want to give an advisory opinion because there could be varying circumstances. So we just have to see and hope that you all will have an opportunity to hear it next month.
Okay, thank you. Is any other questions for legal? Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So we will be adoption of agenda, is that correct? That's given already with that deferred? Okay, yes. So we move to the approval of the February 21st to 18 minutes.
Move for approval.
It's been a motion and a second, and please, all for or against? All for? Okay, right, thank you. Shauna, I think you're ready.
There are 4 items on a consent agenda this afternoon. The first is new construction of an addition and partial demolition at 2519 Blair Boulevard, new construction of an addition at 3102 Blakemore Avenue, installation of signage at 515 Madison Street, and new construction of an addition at 3801 Richland Avenue. Staff has reviewed these applications and recommends approval of the items on the consent agenda with conditions suggested for each by staff, finding that the applications meet the design guidelines for their respective overlays.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a motion to
I
move?
move that we accept the consent agenda.
Oh, are there?
Should we check to make sure there isn't anyone who would like an item
Should we
removed?
ask for public comments? Is that right? Is there anyone in the public that has any comments on the consent agenda? Okay, thank you very much. All right, there's been a motion to move approval, and is there a second? Second, there is a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you.
So
So the first item is 934 McFerrin Avenue. It's located at the corner of McFerrin Avenue and Seymour Avenue. The lot is 150 feet wide along Seymour Avenue, which is the width of 3 standard lot sizes in this area. It is 168 feet deep along McFerrin. In 2017, the Metro Council and Metro Planning rezoned the property to allow for increased density on the site. 12 units are proposed, and that does meet the base zoning. The existing house at 934 McFerrin was constructed circa 1948, later than the period of significance for the Greenwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Staff finds that the house's date of construction, materials, and orientation towards McFerrin Avenue do not contribute to the historic character of the Greenwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Staff is recommending approval of the existing house's demolition. The applicant is proposing 6 residential structures with a total of 12 residential units. The number of units is allowed under the existing zoning. Staff is recommending disapproval of the new construction. The proposed development will be largely oriented to face Seymour Avenue, which is appropriate. There will be 3 duplex structures facing Seymour. At the back, there will be 3 smaller structures also containing 2 residential units each. Vehicular access to the site will be via a new curb cut and shared driveway off of McFerrin towards the back of the lot, in between the 2 sets of structures. The driveway is approximately 29 feet wide at the street. Typically, the Commission has not allowed for driveways that exceed 12 feet in width. However, because of the density of the lot, staff finds that the wider driveway to be appropriate, but we are concerned about its visual impact on the historic neighborhood. Each unit will have attached parking, which is not typically allowed for the front units, but staff finds it to be appropriate in this instance because of the density of the site. Most of the units facing Seymour Avenue have walkways leading from the front porches to the sidewalks. However, Unit 6, which is located at the corner of McFerrin and Seymour, has a corner entrance and 1 walkway leading from the sidewalk to McFerrin. In order for the project to meet the design guidelines and to address both streets, Unit 6 should have 1 walkway to Seymour Avenue and 1 walkway to McFerrin Avenue. While the project does meet all base zoning setbacks, staff has concerns about the spacing of the structures on the lot. First, the site plan does not reflect the current sidewalk regulations for new development in this neighborhood. Neither Seymour nor McFerrin have sidewalks currently. The site plan shows a 5-foot sidewalk along both McFerrin and Seymour with no grass strips. According to Metro Planning, the development should have a 6-foot grass strip along McFerrin at the edge of the street, then a 6-foot sidewalk for a total width of 12 feet. Again, they're just showing 5 feet here. And along Seymour, there should be a 4-foot grass strip and a 5-foot sidewalk for a total of 9 feet. So along McFerrin, Metro Planning is saying that they should have basically a 12-foot wide sidewalk and grass strip. Along Seymour, it should be 9 feet. The wider sidewalk requirement will affect the setbacks of the structures, particularly along McFerrin Avenue, where Unit 6 is just 9 feet from the side property line. Given the required sidewalk width along McFerrin Avenue, Unit 6 should likely be pushed back further from McFerrin. The front setbacks, proposed to be 29 feet from Seymour, are likely appropriate, even with a wider sidewalk, since the 800 block of Seymour does not have any contributing buildings. Staff's primary concern is about that McFerrin Avenue setback. Staff also has concerns about the amount of space in between the units facing Seymour Avenue. The applicant is proposing just 8 feet in between the structures. Staff finds that this rhythm of spacing does not meet the historic context, where historic houses are generally a minimum of 10 to 15 feet apart, and there's often quite more than 15 feet in between the houses. The units facing Seymour Avenue should be a minimum of 10 feet apart in order to meet the historic context rhythm of spacing. The applicant is proposing 26 feet 10 inches in between the houses facing Seymour Avenue and those at the rear. Staff finds that this distance is greater than what is typically required between the spacing between houses and outbuildings, and therefore we're okay with the amount of space between the front structures and the rear structures. So here are the facades facing Seymour Avenue. The houses have a maximum width of 40 feet. Note that the houses will actually sit closer together than they appear in this drawing. The houses are drawn here to be about 10 feet apart in the drawing, but the site plan shows that they will just be about 8 feet apart. Staff finds that the overall heights and number of stories of the units facing Seymour Avenue could be appropriate, as there are a handful of historic houses that are between 30 and 34 feet tall in the vicinity, and there are no historic houses on this block of Seymour. However, staff finds that the proposed widths of 40 feet for units 1 through 6 are too wide and do not meet the historic context. There are no historic houses wider than 37 feet in the immediate vicinity. Even though units 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 are designed so that they have a narrow width at the front, the maximum width of 40 feet occurs not too far back from the front and will be easily perceived from the street. The proposed widths result in houses that are overscaled for the historic context. Moreover, the widths of 40 feet create a situation where the houses are too close together and are too close to the McFerrin Avenue property line. On units 1 and 2, there are expanses of nearly 15 feet along the side facades without a window or door opening. Staff finds that this expansive wall space without a door or window opening does not meet the design guidelines and that a window would be required in order for the window pattern to meet the design guidelines. Here's a view of the houses from McFerrin Avenue, showing the sides of units 6 and 7 and the rear structure. The design guidelines state that for multi-unit developments, the back dwellings or interior dwellings should be subordinate to those from the front to those that face the street. Subordinate generally means that the width and height of the buildings are less than the primary structures that face the street. Staff finds that in this case, the rear units are sufficiently subordinate in both height and width to the structures facing Seymour Avenue. They are approximately 6 feet 8 inches narrower and about 1 foot to 5 feet shorter than the historic houses facing, I'm sorry, not historic, the main houses facing Seymour Avenue. So here's a rendering that the architect provided along Seymour Avenue. And this shows the corner of Seymour and McFerrin. And here are some context photos. So the top house is 928 McFerrin. It's a historic house that faces McFerrin Avenue, just a little bit down the street from this development site. The bottom shows kind of typical houses along Seymour Avenue next to this property. So most of the houses on this block of Seymour Avenue, or all the houses on this block of Seymour Avenue, are not historic and could be demolished and redeveloped. Here are some of the kind of typical houses looking north on McFerrin, and 946 Seymour on the bottom is not too far from the development site, and it is a 2-story structure that is 37 feet wide and 35 feet tall. So before I do the official recommendation summary, I wanted to reiterate some of the main concerns, because there are some concerns that typically staff could work out with the architect, and then there are some concerns which we feel merit the recommendation for disapproval. So first is that there's only 8 feet of space in between the properties, and that does not meet the historic context. The 40-foot widths of the houses we feel are too large and don't meet the historic context. And that the plans don't include the required sidewalk widths along McFerrin Avenue and Seymour, which would kind of affect the setback, particularly along McFerrin Avenue. So it's really for those 3 main reasons that we're recommending disapproval. Things like the window openings likely could be worked out with the architect. So in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of the demolition of the existing structure, finding that its demolition meets Section 3B2 of the design guidelines. Staff is recommending disapproval of the new construction, finding that the proposed development does not meet Section 2B1A for height, 2B1B for scale, 2B1C for setback and rhythm of spacing, 2B1F for orientation, 2B1G for proportion and rhythm of openings, and 2B1K for the multi-unit detached developments, cottage developments. Yeah, that's it. So we're recommending disapproval of the new development, and I believe the architects are here.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Melissa at the moment? Okay. Applicant, please state your name and address.
My name is Jeff Goff. I'm with Root Architecture, 753 Alloway. And we actually deferred this project a month to try to help work through some of these issues, and also to meet with the neighborhood, to try to get their feel about it, to be able to talk with Councilman Davis about that as well. And as stated before, it's an RM 20A zone lot. It allows 14 3-story units, and so as a client and a design team thought that was a little bit big for the area, so we actually brought it down to 12, as you see here. And And so I think that's one thing we tried to do to kind of reduce that density is what the neighborhood and we had a problem with as well, as the density and the parking were always a big issue. And so we tried to go with this scheme of 12 1.5-story houses to try to, bring it down to the neighborhood scale instead of having a large, dense corner that the zoning would actually allow for. It's surrounded by RS6 lots, I believe, so it's it'd be a big change right in the corner. So we thought this was kind of a really good sort of happy medium between what a zoning would allow and what the neighborhood would kind of be hoping for. So that's how we addressed the density situation. And then the parking, we've made these units 20 feet wide, which equate to being 40 feet wide on Seymour Avenue, to try to get all those cars inside the units, which was another issue we knew that we would have with the neighborhood and just us as well as designers. We wanted to get those cars off the street into the houses as much as possible. So that's where the genesis of that 40-foot width is, just the clients and ours desire to get those cars off the street. We've actually, we've shown those sidewalks coming down McFerrin Avenue and Seymour along our site. We thought that was going to be a nice thing to show the neighborhood as well, to kind of say that this is going to start to sort of improve the corner where we are. And so the main issue that we were, I think, really hitting with historic was just that width. And I didn't really see a way around to kind of make everybody meet in the middle with the width of the house being 40 feet, the distance between them, the size of the lot. We didn't see a better way to try to interpret the design. So that's why we still have those issues hanging out there with the width and the spacing between them. We really worked hard to try to make those rear units subservient to the front units. They're only one bedroom, one car houses, so they're about 725 square feet apiece, so it's a much smaller building back there. So it really keeps that massing down. It makes it look like a much less substantial building. So we kind of like how that transitions around the corner. But we have Michael Garrigan to speak to any site or parking issues you might have today. He's going to be our site civil engineer. And we also have Councilman Davis is here too, if you have any questions for him as well. But thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis, would you like to speak?
Good afternoon, Board. Good afternoon, Metro employees, historic commissioners, and historic heads. I just want to thank all of you for your hard work. I want to thank Historic for staff members from Metro always working past the hours that are required, and also I want to thank the board for volunteering their time. Well, this is kind of difficult because this is a very weird intersection. I want to thank the applicant and the architects and the engineer for coming out because, I'd say about a year and a half ago, we had just gotten we call it the golden ticket from Public Works. They're doing a sidewalk down McFerrin and Seymour, and they're in the design process right now. But one of the difficulties of this, and I'm not sure where, and maybe, one of the staff members could help me out there. Part of that street where McFerrin is, because, you got the Moss, if I'm facing downtown, I have Moss Tacos on my right, I got the pharmacy and the Holland House on my left. Okay, what we're looking at, we're going to be moving that yellow line over because, we got a parking issue over there. And what's going on is I think there's one of those historic walls nearby. So one of the things where the neighbors were like, well, when they do the sidewalk, when they make the improvement, I don't want them to tear up the historical, and I don't want that either. I don't think anybody wants that. So it's kind of made it difficult for them to meet the setbacks too. With that's going on. I think it's the wall stops right in front of the yellow house. I'm not 100% sure.
I know that the wall doesn't go down.
Oh, I know. Yeah, by the yellow house. But what makes that difficult too is when we move that yellow line over, to allow more, traffic flow. And we're going to do no parking on that one side to help relieve some of the congestions. I think that was one of the concerns that, when we were going to have them build their portion of the sidewalk that they're required to build is how width it is. So it's one of those circumstances where we're trying to, follow what historic wants us to do, but at the same time, we want to be sensitive to the sidewalk design, which I know it's not your fault. It's, a lot of it is Metro Council for passing this ordinance, which has made stuff a lot difficult, for everybody. And so I don't know if there's a solution, because my neighbors like the fact that there's parking going to be off the streets, because they're going to have garages and some additional parking more than what codes is requiring them to. They love the fact that they reduced the unit count, but they want to come out with a positive result from the board. And so how do we get it there so we can keep the parking, like the garages, and also parking with, and giving them their setbacks, to where it may or may not impede, the potential sidewalk there, and also moving of the yellow line over. And once again, I know the wall stops there, but it also makes it difficult for construction for sidewalks, because, we don't want to tear down the wall. So it may get very narrow and then may get wide again, possibly. I'm not an engineer, and I don't work for Public Works. And so I really think, the applicant is trying to be in compliance, with historic, but just the topography of the area, and also my neighbors when you're going down Seymour, wanting their sidewalk there, which they deserve. The one that Public Works is doing that we got funding for 2 years ago, that they're in the design phase, we got our golden ticket, goes all the way down there. So that side that's across from there, down Seymour, from their development, is going to be very walkable. And now we're at traffic, and I'm talking to Bonnie Crumley about getting an application in for traffic and parking, so we can make no non-parking on that side. And the developer is very supportive of that too, because he understands the issues that are going on. So I want to make him in compliance with historic, if this makes sense, without him making the neighbors mad by putting more parking on the street. Because I may be wrong, but if he makes stuff I don't know how smaller he has to go, but if he makes it smaller and gets rid of some stuff, he may have to use the parking on the street. And he's not said that, he's not threatened that. He was just like, hey, I want to do what the neighbors want me to do. But I don't know if there's a way. All of you are very smart people, so I think there's a way to get him in compliance, without disturbing, because they look very historic to me. And I'm not a historic expert. I'm not Robin or Tim Walker or any of these fine young people over here, okay? But they look pretty historic, So, and the neighbors, some neighbors think they are historic, and some neighbors think the design is great, but it's not historic. They're thinking old Hermitage mansions, but I'm like, well, I don't want to look like the Hermitage, but I like the design, and we're just trying to get as much parking on the development and not put any more on the street. But if that makes sense, and I'm in support of the development, because he has a lot of parking, and that's because I get all the calls from the parking and the congestion, and I want Public Works to get started on my sidewalk down Seymour and on my crosswalk, so that people can walk down Seymour to Rite Aid, to the pharmacy, and to all those wonderful places. And I want to kind of get past this so we can also know how much parking do we need to take off the street, because I don't want to penalize him because he's wanting to be in compliance with this agency right here. So thank you for your time and all the hours you put in helping my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Do we still have minutes for the applicant? Is there anyone else that wants to speak on the applicant's behalf? Okay, do you want to save your time for a rebuttal if we have questions as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're open for public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this project? Okay, close public hearing. We will have discussion between the board, please. Oh, okay. Council member? Thank you.
We had a meeting scheduled on Monday with the PW department and traffic and parking about some stuff over here trying to work this out. It's not the applicant's fault. I don't want to punish. We had a tornado warning, so we canceled the meeting at the East Precinct.
Okay, thank you. Just for the record, we did have public comment sent to the board today. Okay, commissioners, do you want to have a discussion?
I guess I do have one question for the applicant. Mr. Goff, could you sort of clarify for us the issue with the sidewalk?
Well, I think as Councilman said, it's a little bit up in the air for us. I know that we kind of drew as a diagram the sidewalks along both sides, knowing that we'd have to improve it, but knowing the exact number, we have started with a diagram. That's our architectural diagram, not an official diagram from Michael. So it's, I do realize we're going to have to do some more along McFerrin, and we were planning to do along Seymour to start that process down both streets. We're happy to, make the arrangements that whatever is required for that.
So you don't see a problem with what Public Works is requiring on this particular property with the sidewalk?
Well, I didn't think that we really had a choice in how to deal with that. So we would have to deal with whatever's required on that, certainly. I know that as far as the parking is concerned, one thing we talked about at the meeting was being able to use spaces between the three units in the back. We've got that 15-foot space back there where we could kind of squeeze some more cars in, which obviously we weren't able to update the meeting drawings in time. But there's some issues like that where we know that we're going to have some changes along the street. We're trying to find every little part we can. Thank you.
Mr. Goff, so if you do have to follow on the sidewalk recommendation, will that change your floor plans and your shifting of the property, of the buildings, of the construction?
Well, I would like to take a look and see what the implications of that are, because if it's a couple of feet, we could probably squeeze a little bit out of, well, I don't know. I know the spaces between the houses are drawn at 8 feet. We can knock that down to 6 and squeeze some more space out of the lot that way. And then, of course, in the back, we do the same thing where we squeeze them down a little bit. That makes historic recommendations even more stringent in that case, because we're getting them even closer together. So it does pose a problem, but I without a definitive number of how far the setback is inside, I don't know for sure what our response would be. But I know our first one would be to try to squeeze them up a little bit between the houses.
Would that seem to be not clear to us in terms of how we would actually view this project if it's not clear on what the dimensions are? Melissa, is there a comment on that? Robin?
Anything that would be a significant change if they're pushing the houses closer together, or, we would need to bring back to the commission. It wouldn't be something that we could approve at staff level.
And the commissioners would have to agree to that it could be approved at staff level?
Yes.
I will add to that that's part of the reason for disapproval is because we don't really know.
Okay.
Right now, it doesn't seem to be meeting those requirements. BZA is the only one that can change the sidewalk requirements.
Okay.
Could we possibly defer this?
We as a commission cannot defer. It would have to be the applicant to defer. Commissioners, any other questions?
I do have to agree with staff that the 8 feet between the buildings is pretty minimal, and that the 40-foot width is pretty excessive for this area. So I think some change in the direction of the staff recommendation would really be appropriate, especially if you've got 5 feet on the side property line. So that's pretty tight as well. I know that 20 feet in width for a garage is close to the smallest, but perhaps it could be something where maybe the front part of the building could be a little bit wider apart, and that 40-foot width wouldn't extend all the way. They've done some of that now on some of the properties, but not all of them. So I think that would reflect more what the staff recommendation was.
Okay, do you have a motion, Cyril?
Do you have any? So with respect to 934 McFerrin Avenue, I move for acceptance of the staff recommendation for approval of the demolition of the structure and for disapproval of the construction of the new buildings.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second. All in favor? Or all? Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, applicant.
Okay, the next item is 1303 Eastland Avenue. It is an application to convert an existing outbuilding into a detached accessory dwelling unit. First, some background. In 2015, MHCC staff issued an administrative permit to build a half-story on top of an existing garage. You can kind of see the garage there in the picture. That's the photo is taken from Eastland Avenue. The 2015 preservation permit for the outbuilding states that the outbuilding is, quote, not a detached accessory dwelling unit, end quote. MHCC staff found that the addition to the garage met the design guidelines for outbuildings. However, the design requirements for a dadu were not applied. I will note here that the addition to the outbuilding was done under a previous owner. It's the new owner of the property who is applying to convert it into a dadu. So here's the photo of the front of the outbuilding, which faces Eastland Avenue. The outbuilding is 484 square feet in footprint. The lot size is approximately 12,000 square feet, so we would allow a footprint of up to 1,000 square feet, but they are just at 484 square feet. So they're well within the footprint regulations for dadus. The structure's materials are appropriate, and the outbuilding does meet the base zoning stepbacks. The dormer that faces the street does meet the dadu ordinance, but the issue is coming in with a dormer that faces the alley. That dormer does not meet the dadu ordinance. The dadu ordinance requires that dormers be set back 2 feet from the wall below. This alley dormer stacks on the wall below. Its width meets the dadu requirements, so here it's really just the fact that it's stacking on that wall below that's the issue. Because it stacks on the wall below, it does not meet the dadu ordinance and cannot be legally used as a dwelling unit. Just a little bit of background, the dadu ordinance states that, quote, any existing or proposed, unquote, outbuilding must meet the regulations for the ordinance. So, we've been tasked to make sure that any existing outbuilding, whether or not it was built 20 years ago, last year, that needs to meet the dadu ordinance in order to have a dwelling unit in it. So staff is recommending approval of converting the existing outbuilding into a detached accessory dwelling unit with the condition that the rear wall dormers step back from the wall below a minimum of 2 feet. So with this condition, staff finds the project to meet section 1716.030G of the Metro Code. And the owner is here. I'm happy to answer any questions before turning it over to her.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay, thank you, Melissa. The applicant, please state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Everett. Our address is 1303 Eastland Avenue. My husband and I purchased our home just this past December in 2017. At the time we purchased the home, our understanding, as informed by the seller's notes, was that at one point the building on the back of our property was used as a garage apartment. However, it wasn't until I went to apply for a rental property permit that I was made aware that it was not zoned for use as a dwelling unit. It was just an outbuilding. Melissa let me know that the building as it stands meets all the requirements to be converted into a dwelling unit, except for the rear dormer is not inset that 2 feet on the back in the alleyway. It is my understanding that the 2-foot dormer setback guideline was originally implemented as one way to address the concern that residents have in historic areas to keep such outbuildings as ours to a modest size. The footprint of our building, like Melissa said, is 484 square feet. That is less than half of what we are actually allowed to have on our property because of the size of our property. Current regulations would allow an outbuilding with a footprint of up to 1,000 square feet. This means that the rear dormer, as is, has a very modest size impact because the building at 484 square feet falls well below the size of what would otherwise be authorized if the building was larger. Accordingly, I would like to respectfully request the conversion of the outbuilding into a dadu, keeping it as is. Also, I would like to note that we've received the signature of all of our adjacent neighbors. I had to do this in order to seek approval for the residential permit approval. And all of our neighbors are aware that we desire to turn this into a dwelling unit, and I went and personally introduced myself to all of them, and none of them addressed any concern with our desire to do so. They all know it's a very small space back there. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant? Okay, not at this time. Thank you. Open public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this project? Okay. Seeing none, we are closed public hearing, and we are now in discussion with the board. Just a comment as well, clarifying that, because as of late, our commission does consider outbuilding and dadus similarly, because we're getting more of these applicants to convert outbuildings to dadus. So having consistency in that gives much clarity to the staff and also for our own voting as well. So.
So given that, would we, if this was an outbuilding, would we approve it as is?
I think that's a discussion. From what the recommendation is that it does not follow dadu.
But you just said that we treated dadus and outbuildings the same.
Correct.
So it wouldn't qualify for an outbuilding either.
Well, we're looking at the dadu. So in the dadu zoning, the 2 foot has to be met.
So we're not looking at them the same then?
Well, it's the fact that if it was looked at back in the day, similarly, perhaps it hadn't been as much as we are more so today. But we are looking at it similarly, are we not? No? Not in your opinion?
I mean, if it qualifies as an outbuilding right now, why wouldn't it qualify as a dadu? Because of the 2 foot setback, so there's a difference between the dadu and the outbuilding.
There is.
Thank you. That's my own.
We think it was approved before.
It was approved before.
Because you were not treating dadus and outbuildings in the same way.
Because we were not
Which has
treating
created this
the outbuilding.
issue.
It's the same way.
And so now you have made a commitment to treat them the same. But she's in this place now where she wants a dadu, and we are obligated by ordinance to apply those design standards in the dadu ordinance.
Well, it's just my opinion that, given the fact that this building is so much substantially smaller than what she could purchase, and since, I mean, I don't have a problem with this building as it is right now because it's a smaller size, and and if we want to treat them both the same now, then maybe we're changing courses. No, we're not. Okay.
I'm also just reading the recommendation again, other than commissioners, please weigh in here, that because the rear dormer stacks on the wall below, it does not meet the dadu ordinance and cannot be legally used as a dwelling unit. So that's, to me, very clear that it cannot be used as a dwelling unit unless this 2 foot is remedied. LaDonna, do you have any?
Well, I agree with the staff recommendation that it does need to meet the appropriate guidelines.
Okay. Eric?
I agree. I guess I wanted to hear more what Cyril would say around it, and then also because of the fact of the neighbors not having an issue, it's kind of more of what I want to try to get understanding about that as well.
Just something that I want to just clarify on, that the neighbors are, public comment is important, but our purview is to follow guidelines, just to remind ourselves that.
So these are some of the more difficult situations that we run into, and they're quite frankly easier if the same owner was involved. But when you have an ownership change and with the size of this, yes, the regs, today's regs and the way that we're treating this today would call for reduction of that dormer by 2 feet to pull it back from the front edge. It is a smaller property, so I agree from that standpoint. I struggle with these a lot. It's a tough call to make. I believe in the regs. I believe in enforcing them consistently, but by the same token, this is a little unique situation with a smaller structure that was previously approved for an outbuilding that the use is now being changed on.
I have a question to legal. So if it's not following the requirement of the DADU, what happens then? Will the applicant then not get their permit?
I'm sorry. For the, okay. We're discussing over here, I'm sorry. For any provision of the code sections that are not going to be complied with, you have to seek a variance from the BZA in order to do that. If they don't comply and they want to use it, they would need such a variance. I think what has happened here, and you correct me if I'm off track here, Robin, is that 1716.030 subsection G, specifically section 9, relates to how detached accessory dwelling units have been treated by the Historic Zoning Commission. You've had some great discretion in how that's been applied in the past, and the effort is now to make it consistent, because what your purview is over is what the building looks like, really the design of the building. So really, you really don't care whether what it is used for ultimately, whether it's a detached accessory dwelling unit or whether it's just a regular outbuilding. You want it to meet the design guidelines so that it is consistent with the neighborhood. That's your end goal. And so at this point, your task is to whereas in the past you kind of had looked at detached accessory dwelling units a little bit differently. You don't have to. You can follow the ordinance itself so long as the ordinance is consistent with your guidelines. And in this case, making sure that they are consistent with the ordinance would also be consistent with your guidelines. So it's just a matter of whether or not you feel it's appropriate. That's your ultimate question. Is it appropriate to approve this structure in the way that it looks currently? If you think that it is not appropriate because you think that the 2-foot requirement needs to be met, which under the ordinance it would have to be met, but under your guidelines and applying your guidelines, it's in italicized language, so it doesn't have to, you have some flexibility there. Then if you think that it should be met, then you should deny the request. If you think that it should not be met or is not necessarily, it's not fatal to the application that it not be met, then you can grant the request. So it's really what you think is appropriate for that particular neighborhood, given the area and what you're trying to do going forward.
Okay.
I don't have any further comments.
Are there any other questions or discussions? Okay, we're pretty clear on, okay, all right. Well, then, does someone have a motion of either or? Okay. What happens if we don't have a motion?
I'll do that. Okay.
If you don't have a motion, it will be approved as is.
That's
I
right.
believe the owner said something else. Can the owner say anything
Say it
else?
again, Donna. I'm sorry.
I think the owner, did you have another comment?
Sure, you are. I think you've got a few more minutes. Yes, please do.
I just wanted to speak to what legal just mentioned in regards to whether or not you think the building as it stands meets the requirements for the neighborhood. I believe the previous owners built this in 2015, and Historic did approve just 3 years ago this design for our neighborhood. So if we're looking at it from a design perspective and not a use perspective, it was approved by Historic to be built in this way. That's just all I want to add.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And we appreciate that. In the documentation, it has that approval in the drawings that were done. So unfortunately, at that point in time, we were treating the two separately. So it was approved as an outbuilding. And that's the difficulty we get into.
Yeah. And probably going forward, the staff is much more aware on how to work with applicants on that, so that, Commissioner, that we would be more consistent, that we're not going to, have these kind of deliberated discussions on whether it's of use or the design guidelines. Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, well. All right.
So I'll make a motion that in regards to 1303 Eastland Avenue, that we accept the recommendations of the staff to convert the existing outbuilding into a detached accessory dwelling unit with the condition that the rear wall dormer step back from the wall be, below a minimum of 2 feet. Is that clear?
There is a motion. Is there a second? Okay, the motion does not pass.
You'll need a new motion.
Can someone make a new motion?
Or else it will pass.
I would like to make a motion to accept the detached accessory dwelling unit as is and approve it as it stands, given the fact that it doesn't look egregious to me. It's a smaller building. Circumstances are such that these people in good faith have this outbuilding, and today, and so that's my motion. I recommend that we accept the applicant's request.
There is a motion. There's a second.
Second.
Okay, there's a second. Let's raise hands on, to be really clear, because we're short of, on the edge of quorum. So those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. So you have all 4. So that motion passes. So thank you, and that's it for 1303 Eastland.
All right, the next case is 2006 19th Avenue South. This house is a circa 1915 brick bungalow that does contribute to the character of the Belmont-Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. The request is to alter 2 window openings on the left side facade of the historic house, which is considered partial demolition. So the request is to remove the 2 window openings located on the ground level near the front of the house on the left side facade. So the windows here are outlined in red, and the image on the left is the existing facade, and the image on the right is what is proposed. So staff finds that changing the window opening located at the midpoint to a door, which is where you see that arrow, is appropriate, since the opening is located near the midpoint, and the location and width of the proposed door opening are similar to that of the existing window opening. Given the location, the changes to the opening will not be highly visible from the street, and the alteration of this opening keeps with previous decisions by the Commission to permit alterations at this sort of location that's either at the midpoint or closer to the rear of the house. In addition, the Commission has permitted roof overhangs that do not include posts that go all the way to the ground, since this type of alteration is removable. So for these reasons, staff finds that changing this window to a door does meet Section 5.2 for appropriate demolition and does not meet Section 5.1 for inappropriate demolition. So moving on to the second proposed change, the plan also proposes to replace the single window, which is closer to the front of the house, and replace that with a paired window as shown here. Staff finds this alteration to be inappropriate. Windows are considered character-defining features of historic houses, and the window opening located in this location is much more visible than the one that's proposed to be altered at the midpoint. In addition, the proposed alteration doubles, or maybe even slightly more than doubles, the width of the existing opening. So for these reasons, staff finds that the alteration of the window opening on the left side facade near the front of the house does not meet Section 5.2 for appropriate demolition and does meet Section 5.1 for inappropriate demolition. So staff therefore recommends that this window opening remain unaltered. In conclusion, staff recommends approval with two conditions. The first, that the window opening on the left side of the house near the front shall remain unaltered, and two, that staff approve the final details, dimensions, and materials of the door and stoop cover for the window at the midpoint prior to purchase and installation.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions? Okay, not this moment. Is the applicant here? Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Susan Hager. I'm the architect on this project. My address is 1205 RD Avenue. There are a couple things going on here. This entire sidewall of the house has been compromised. There has been water infiltration, and the brick is bowing. So we intend to remove all the brick, and most of the framing needs to be replaced as well, as it's rotten. The windows will also be replaced. So we will reuse the brick, and that I'll come to that in a minute. The long wall of this apartment, it's a duplex. It's currently a duplex. Historically, it's been a duplex. And the long wall of the apartment faces north. So it's a very dark space, and the client would really like to get some more light in there. So that's part of what is driving the request. But the expanded window on that front corner that we are proposing will be the same as the window that's on the same elevation at the back. So, you know, it's not like we're proposing a type of window that's inappropriate for this house. And after some conversations with the contractor on this, we have been concerned about salvaging the brick. You know, there's always like a 5 to 20% loss in salvaging the brick, and enlarging this window opening would help us meet that, because it's going to be hard to match the brick. So there are a number of things working together that would really help us out here. When I cranked the numbers on it with the window modification, it would allow us a 10% salvage loss, which if we work hard, we can probably meet that without having mismatched brick. So those are all my thoughts on this.
I do have a question.
Yes.
On, you had mentioned some water damage and compromised wall. Do you have pictures of that you shared with the
contractor does.
Okay.
I'm Bill Lawrence, the general contractor on the project, 3012 Brightwood Avenue, Nashville, Tennessee. So I talked to Historic several months ago about the conditions on the sidewall of the house, and the owner wanted me to ask about doing siding on it, lap siding, and called in. They said couldn't do that, but we could replace the brick. And if we were using the brick from the house, then it would be approved. That brick would be appropriate. So that's our plan. I have some pictures of the damage. You can see the whole side of the brick that wall is detached from the house. So it's in a dangerous condition. It needs to be taken down and replaced. So I could pass these around. This shows the separation at some of the windows of the brick falling off the building, and some other pictures of the house.
Was that just discovered lately, or
the owners
during
bought the house in, I believe, well, I don't know exactly when they bought the house, but they brought me in to take a look at the side of the building. The brick was falling off of it. So it's been in the same basic condition for 6 months that I've been involved. Before that, it's probably been loose for a long time. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. And so it's a couple inches off the side of the house. You can see where it is on the window. It's pulling away from the windows, and they've been caulked a bunch. So it's, I didn't take a picture in the back corner, but it's 3 inches away from the siding of, the underlayment of the house in the back. And it could fall down. So we need to take that down. You'll see in the pictures there's the brick mason scaffolding and some planks out there. We're waiting to do the brick repairs until we have approvals for what we're going to do to the side of the building. So when we take the brick off, we want to put it back in a configuration that fits the new doorway and potentially the new window. So that's, we're waiting to order, place window orders and have worked on it until we have this meeting. Since we've been looking at this, I've been driving around the neighborhood quite a bit and looking at bungalows, and I took some pictures this morning of bungalows on this block of 19th and this block of 20th Avenue this morning, and the window configurations toward the front of the house on the bungalows varies greatly. There's singles, doubles, triples, and quadruples windows in that location on similar size bungalows from the same period, which I have some pictures of from 19th and 20th Avenue.
Okay, we may come back and ask you questions. Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak on this behalf or project? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close public hearing and we'll discuss with board.
Well, I just have two comments of that came to my mind when we were looking at this project. First, I think that the two windows on either side of the door looks more balanced. It's attractive, and I can understand the light going in. I personally live in a building that was built in 1852, and when they started looking at that to renovate it, there were trees growing out of the bricks, and there was the walls were moving when you pushed them. So they hired a historic tuck point person that would remove the grout and put new grout in, and now the building is stabilized. And so that's just, my two comments of when you were going through this process. And so I just wanted to.
Commissioners, sorry, I would ask you to add removal of all the brick to the request. We weren't aware of that, so that's not a part of our report, but that is partial demolition. So you'll need
Removal of the brick is partial demolition.
Yes.
So that would be part of the recommendation as well, is that we would approve it or not approve it?
Well, we don't have the information you have, so I don't really know. We didn't know about that. We didn't.
Okay. That's new information is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's important.
Yeah. Yes. Give the board a moment to discuss, and then we may bring you back up. Cyril, do you have any comment on structure?
Certainly, there's no question from these photographs that the brick needs to be removed and replaced with brick ties in appropriate mortar and put back in place. With respect to the change of the windows, the closer things are to the front of the structure, then the more difficult it is to change. And when you're following the guidelines that are set by the Department of the Interior and all the preservation standards, closer to the front of the house, then the more sensitive they are to trying to maintain what was there to start with. I do understand the owner's request. You're right, it's more balanced. It's not an unpleasing elevation when you look at that. However, that same room does have 3 full windows on the front that face the west. This is a north-facing side, so I understand the need for trying to maintain the bricks. Hopefully it's the lime mortar, and that you'll be able to salvage a lot more than you would if it was Portland cement mortar, but I don't find it as compelling a case to change what's there now.
Okay. Eric or LaDonna, any other comments?
I would just want to know, what does the impact of the new information have on what we can decide today, if anything?
I don't.
But
Well, I
either
think-
way, whether the window is balanced or not, aesthetically it looks appealing, but we need to follow the guidelines, I believe, in that regard as well.
Well, I think clearly the evidence they presented to this commission convinces me that we need to go ahead and approve the demolition and reconstruction of that wall as part of this project. So I think that's one thing.
Okay. So would you like to?
Edify me here, please, Council, Commissioner. In the example that I told you before of the pre-Civil War building, where the wall was compromised heavily, they didn't have to demolish the building. They just ripped out the grout and put new grout in. Why, in this case, would it have to be demolished? And
When the bricks are in the same plane, that's an even plane, then repointing is sufficient for all that. When the brick has bowed out from the wall and pulled out by several inches, then that's typically an indication not only that you've had failure in the mortar and the brick, but that there were either insufficient or no ties put into that brick to hold it against the wall. And so when you have that, it's a structural danger, and just replacing the mortar wouldn't bring it back into plumb.
I can add to that too, since it was a pre-Civil War building, it's probably a truly masonry wall, meaning it's like 3 bricks thick. In the case of a later building like this, it is a frame building, and the brick is just a veneer, so that the building won't be demolished, but that veneer will be removed and put back.
okay, thank you, Robin.
Okay.
That makes better sense. Thank you. Okay. Is there a motion? Or, let me, any more questions to the applicant? Okay. And the applicant, okay. No further comments, okay.
So with respect to 2006 19th Avenue South, I hereby move that we accept staff recommendations for the project with the addition that the removal and replacement of the brick be allowed on the affected side.
There's a motion. There's a second. And all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, there is unanimous. Thank you very much. And I think that is all of our agenda. Robin, is there anything else you'd like to mention? Someone with a voice?
Let you know that next month we'll be meeting at a different location.
Next month, we will be meeting at a different location.
It's on your screen.
Okay, all right. Oh, there it is. All right, thank you very much. And we are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.